Hello, Internet. I know I've been gone for a long time. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded anything. I won't give you too many excuses, but I will say that part of why I wasn't able to upload anything was because, well, I was working on this. This is a project for school. It's technically for a German class I was taking. Half of it, as such, is in German, and half of it is in English. The German half I've provided subtitles for, so you won't feel too lost. The German half will go over Kant's life, his biographical data, and the English portion will focus mostly on the technical aspects or helpful analogies of ways of thinking about the Copernican revolution. So whether you're just idly watching this or preparing madly for some kind of test or final or exam, I hope this is helpful and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much.
All right, our second presentation today is another 202 student. James Sellers is currently officially a junior studying philosophy, and he's taking German 202 and he's taking it for honors. He will be around next year, so we're all very excited about that. His presentation is called, as you can see, Immanuel Kant, How the Most Boring Man in the World Changed History. James.
Damen und Herren, danke. Immanuel Kant ist im Jahre 1724 in der Stadt Königsberg-Preußen geboren. Er ist in dieser Stadt groß geworden und dann 1804 auch dort gestorben. Seine 79 Jahre, obwohl sie ziemlich langweilig erscheinen, haben bedeutende Implikationen für die intellektuelle Tradition. Sein Geburtsname war Immanuel, aber er hat ihn später verändert zu Immanuel, nachdem er Hebräisch lernte. Seine Familie väterlicherseits war schottischer Abstammung. Wieso? Deshalb buchstabiert sein Vater den Familiennamen Kant mit C. Seine Eltern waren pietistisch und haben viel Wert auf die Religion gelegt. Obwohl Kant später mehr von den Überzeugungen der Vernunft eher als Glaube geschrieben hat, gab er Acht, dass er Glauben nicht völlig ausgeschlossen hat. In seinem täglichen Leben war Kant ordentlich, diszipliniert und sehr berechenbar. Die Bürger von Königsberg konnten die genauen Stunden wegen der Gleichmäßigkeit von seinen täglichen Spaziergängen rechnen, wie Clockwork. Der aufregendste Tag seines Lebens war, als er eine Ananas in der Brust empfing. Also, interessant. Obwohl er klein und ruhig war, haben seine großen Ideen die Geschichte beeinflusst. In der Geschichte der Philosophie bezieht sich man entweder auf Vorkantien oder Nachkantien Gedanken. Seine Ideen haben die deutschen Idealisten wie Fichte und Schelling beeinflusst, die dann weiter Hegel beeinflusst haben, der dann Marx beeinflusst hat. Und Marx hat die gesamten europäischen Länder und den Geschichtsverlauf bis in Asiens beeinflusst. Immanuel Kant, der ein unauffälliger Mann war und der nie mehr als 60 Meilen außerhalb des Ortes seiner Geburt reiste, hat mit seinen starken Ideen die Welt für immer geändert. Niemand kann sagen, dass Immanuel Kant nicht bedeutend war. Wie der deutsche Dichter Heinrich Heine schrieb, die Lebensgeschichte des Immanuel Kant ist schwer zu beschreiben, denn er hatte weder Leben noch Geschichte. Er lebte ein mechanisch geordnetes, fast abstraktes Hagelstolzenleben in einem stillen, abgelegenen Gässchen zu Königsberg, einer alten Stadt an der nordöstlichen Grenze Deutschlands. Ich glaube nicht, dass die große Uhr der dortigen Kathedral leidenschaftslose und regelmäßiger ihr äußeres Tagewerk vollbrachte, als ihr Landsmann, Immanuel Kant. Aufstehen, Kaffee trinken, schreiben, kollegieren, lesen, essen, spazieren, gehen, alles hat seine bestimmte Zeit. Und die Nachbarn wussten ganz genau, dass die Glocke 3:30 sei, wenn Immanuel Kant in seinem grauen Leibrock, das spanische Brötchen in der Hand, aus seiner Haustür trat und nach der kleinen Lindenallee wandelte, die man seinetwegen noch jetzt den Philosophengang nennt. Sonderbarer Kontrast zwischen dem äußeren Leben des Mannes und seinen zerstörenden, weltzermalmenden Gedanken. Wahrlich, hätten die Bürger von Königsberg die ganze Bedeutung dieses Gedankens geerbt, sie würden vor jenem Manne eine weit grauenhaftere Schau empfunden haben als vor einem Scharfrichter. Vor einem Scharfrichter, der nur Menschen hinrichtet. Aber die guten Leute sahen in ihm nichts anderes als einen Professor der Philosophie. Und wenn er zur bestimmten Stunde vorbeiwanderte, grüßten sie freundlich und richteten etwa nach ihm ihre Taschen. That being said, I'm going to transfer to the English part of the presentation because I dare not attempt to try to explain Kant's philosophy in German. Needless to say, everything I'm about to try to explain is an oversimplification. But given how complicated a man Kant was in his own mind, I think we're all better off with the simplified version. Now, a little bit of historical context and backdrop. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that seeks to understand or explain the ultimate reality of the universe. It's the fundamental question of how, what, when, where, mostly just what. And throughout its history, metaphysics had been in conflict with itself. Up to Kant's time, very little progress of any kind had been made. Basically, you had one philosopher, I don't know, thousands of years ago, saying, reality is like X, like water or air or fire or what have you. And another philosopher would come along maybe 100 years later and say, no, philosophy is like Y. Even further along the road, you'd have a third philosopher who would come along and say, no, you're both wrong, it's like Z. And this kind of bickering was not conducive to progress, and it remains a battlefield of controversies, as Kant liked to name it. Meanwhile, major breakthroughs were being made in the fields of mathematics and natural sciences, as in the case of Newtonian physics or the Copernican heliocentric model. Huge, demonstrable breakthroughs are being made in these sciences, and people are starting to take notice. And meanwhile, metaphysics is sitting in the corner wearing the dunce hat, sucking its thumb. It's pretty embarrassing. Now, hold on to that thought for a moment. Kant saw the potential of a Copernican revolution being applied to the ailing metaphysics to help it along the path of a true science. Now, Copernicus, if you know the story, looked at the geocentric model of the solar system with the Earth at the center, which was based on antiquated Aristotelian science, and said that this doesn't quite fit. Based on the knowledge that I have, the data that I have, I reject this model, and I suggest that we try switching it to see what happens when we look at the solar system with the sun at the center. And as a consequence of this switch, huge progress was made. We now know for a fact that he was right. Kant saw the potential of this same kind of switch being applied to help metaphysics get it off its feet. That being said, this is the old model. Prior to Kant, it was commonly accepted that minds had to conform to objects. This model of how we can know things was called the representational theory of consciousness. This is the model that all those bickering philosophers before were trying to build off of, from Aristotle all the way up to Descartes and beyond. The idea was simple. You've got a mind, a lumpy-looking mind. I'm a philosopher, not a novice. And then you have an object, let's say a tree. And the idea was that the object would exert a force onto the mind, and this in turn would give rise to perception of the object within the mind, which Kant would call Vorstellung, die Vorstellung. Now, as handy as that may have been for the ancients, it didn't cut it in the modern times. And Kant meant to go through with his proposal of switching it. So we have the new model. Kant applied Copernicus' idea of reversal, turning the representational theory of consciousness on its head to show that instead of minds having to conform to objects, objects had to conform to minds. Now, I just realized shortly before putting this together and coming here today that this diagram would make more sense if it was the other way around, reading from left to right. But just bear with me and read from right to left for now. Now, here we have an object. The reason it has a question mark on it is because Kant believed we don't actually know what objects are in and of themselves. That's only for God to know. We can only see things as they appear to us. God sees past the appearance and into the soul. He sees everything. But we poor humans, we have to take appearances and work with that. So we don't really know what it is. But we can see that it gives us clues as to what it is. When the mind, which is a rational thing, imposes order upon the chaos of the object. We see that we get pieces that we can put together to form a complete perception. This is what is required for this to be an object of our experience, what Kant would call Objekt der Sinne. I may seem like a bit of an abstraction, but this blew people's minds. Now, I have some less crazy abstract ways of thinking about this that may prove helpful. What does it mean? What this means is that in order for objects to be perceivable to us, the mind must first impose a certain orderly structure on them, like a blurry object coming into focus, or like eating glasses. Now pretend for a moment that you don't know this is a butterfly. Pretend this is just some blur. Now the mind puts on its glasses, imposes its rational structure on the object, and we have clarity. And you're doing this all the time. Even now, the only reason you can see me is because you've taken the raw data of me and you put it together in your head to form a complete picture of me. As complete as it can be. Another way, my personal favorite way of thinking about this, is Legos. Now, what Kant means is that our whole experience is a product of what we get from objects and the rational structure that our minds impose on them, right? Objects give us Lego pieces. The mind gives us building instructions. Has anyone here played with Legos? Yeah, they're just the bee's knees, aren't they? I once tried to build Minas Tirith, the white city of Gondor, out of Legos, but I ran out of pieces. They had to be white pieces. Now, when we think about Legos, they usually come in a box, right? You get a box full of a bunch of pieces, and it comes with instructions on how to put it all together to make the complete object, right? Typically like a TIE fighter or an X-Wing or whatever it is that they sell nowadays. So, we can see that the object gives us Lego pieces, but no instructions. It's up to the rational mind to put the pieces together in an orderly structure to form a complete image. And like I said, we're doing this all the time, whether you realize it or not. It's an innate function of the mind. Now, what does this mean? Well, the single idea helped to change all of history for Germany and for the world as a whole. This model that Kant proposed was the one that was built on by future thinkers like Hegel, and the entire German idealist movement, like Fichte and Schelling, who in turn influenced people like Karl Marx. And I think it goes without saying that Karl Marx, for better or for worse, changed the whole world. So, arguably, this can all be traced back to that single idea. And at the same time, Kant's ideas and writings were the spearhead of the Enlightenment movement, which completely changed the face of Western society and thought. It forced the individual thinker to be responsible and active in the way they think about things. Kant says your mind needs to be active in its understanding of the world in order to understand anything, which was reflected in his statements about enlightenment being about having the courage to think for oneself. And whether this is all abstractions for us or not, this is our intellectual heritage. Almost all of it that we take for granted can be traced back to the Enlightenment, and consequently, it can all be traced back to Immanuel Kant. Thank you. Fragen? Or is that all just if you like, you can look at some of these texts. I don't expect you to read all of it. You can see for yourself, if you like, how mind-numbingly difficult Kant is to read. In particular, this bit with the sticky note and the line right here will show you his statement about the Copernican revolution. Pretty much everything that I've just said. I think mine's easier to understand. And at the same time, I have this wonderful book, Modern Voyage by William F. Lawhead, that gives a historical overview of everyone leading up to Kant and everybody after Kant. So, if you doubt me that he was influential, just flip through. There's a lot of names in there that were influenced by him and his model. So, if you'd like to, you can look.
Thank you.
Thank you.